Hey, Justin.
Hey,
Hey,
Larry, how
brother.
you doing?
I'm still crazy.
So we're in our garden amongst the plants, and I want to kind of just set the tone for everybody. You founded General Hydroponics in the '70s, correct?
In
Which
1974, you want me to give you the details, or do you just want
sure,
the brief one?
I'll take the details.
All right, in '74, I graduated Berkeley and got a job at Lawrence Berkeley Lab. Dream come true. I got to work in a great science lab. Trouble was, it was a government salary, and cannabis cost too damn much. It was hard to afford. So I had to figure out a better way to grow it. So I started
Yeah,
tinkering and created the original, what came to be known as an aqua farm in its many different forms. Pretty simple. In fact, the design, I think, originates in Quebec. And so I'm going to give credit to our friends in Canada who built the first air pump driven water pumping system. I
that's
simply adapted it.
that's rare getting credit for Canadians these days.
Canadians are my favorite people in the world, and I am deeply troubled by what's happening globally. The part of
Yeah,
my background that you might have missed is that Stuart Copeland and I met when our dads worked in Beirut, Lebanon. Stuart's dad was using CIA as a cover. My
yeah.
dad was in a dark shadow agency. And our dads were there to keep an eye on Kim Philby, who was a Russian double agent, who was going to be put in charge of MI6 until the British figured out that maybe he's not actually on their side. So I came out of a cauldron of chaos in the world, having spent a large part of my childhood in the Middle East from age 6 to 10 in Beirut. Then my dad was brought back to Washington and he worked for President Kennedy, and that was great until the assassination. Any event, it's all a bunch of blather and noise, but once I graduated Berkeley and got my job at Berkeley Lab, I was given the greatest education a person can have, 8 years at Lawrence Berkeley Lab. In '76, the Nobel Prize in Physics was granted to Burton Richter and Samuel Ting at Stanford, but it was won in machinery that was built in my shops with my coworkers, and I had a small part in that. So I got a lucky education. I got to see chemistry, physics, electrical, mechanical, chemical engineering, pretty much every aspect of technology. I had to figure out marketing and sales and management by myself. Because in '76, we won the Nobel Prize. I got my pilot's license and I started General Hydro. That, that's where it came from.
Beautiful. So we never made a three-part at Green Planet until you sold your company. Um, Everybody has tried to duplicate your original three-part formula, the grow, bloom, micro, pink, purple, green, whatever you want to call it. I mean, that must be a pretty big honor. I mean, they say um,
Imitation is the
imitation
sincerest form
is
of
the best form of
flattery.
flattery. Yeah,
But
that's
let's
that's
take
what
a
they
look
say.
back. Let's take a
Yeah,
look back at the three-part formula that I invented before the Flora series, circa 1978.
yeah,
A was a growing formula. It was a one part, it was a dry concentrate.
yeah,
B was a flowering formula. It was one part, actually, no, it was a concentrate dry. And I put the
yeah.
micronutrients into a liquid so I could get accuracy in small elements like copper and
It was
molybdenum, which are
the
needed.
ABC formula.
ABC formula was the origin.
Yeah,
Then we didn't make it. So I put GH on the shelf and I went to Brazil, scientific expedition, came back married, kind of weird. And in circa 1985, I was driving to work. I was working at World Airways then. And there was the first hydro store in Berkeley, Dansko,
yeah.
later became Berkeley Indoor Garden Center. And I got laid off from the airline because they weren't doing too well. So I had an entire inventory of hydroponic systems and the original dry nutrients, the three-part ABC.
Yep.
At that point, we were in business. I was back in my garage mixing nutrients and making hydroponic systems. And I was introduced by an old friend to Dr. Cal Herman, a UC Berkeley chemist of the highest order. He got his doctorate at the Sorbonne, and he's a storied and brilliant chemist. And I said, Cal, hey, we need a liquid concentrate. And so together we developed the three-part Flora series. That was done in the late 80s. And over the years, we were able to improve it as ingredients improved and as our knowledge improved, but the fundamentals remained the same. The concept of a building block nutrient system means you can tailor a formula for any crop at any point in its life. And along the way, things I did that were fun, I got a patent for a three-part formula where one ingredient's red, one is yellow, and one is blue. And you could mix a, let's see, we were mixing yellow and blue to make shades of green for a growth formula. We were mixing red and blue to make flowering formulas for a range of flowering plants. And strangely, sometimes you'd mix the red and yellow to make an orange, which in a very, very weak, mild form was great on orchids. Keep in mind, these formulas actually meet the needs of all kinds of plants and can be adjusted to meet the more specific needs of plants. Things we didn't know back then, which I think are interesting to look at today, is the importance of silica, for example. And that information came out from Dr. Emmanuel Epstein at UC Davis, who really gave us the first handle on silica. Later, my friends in the Netherlands started adopting it for formulas that would go to lettuce, cucumbers, melons. Immensely help those crops, one, to grow better, and two, to be more resistant to disease and the like. So the field of new elements that are important and useful for plants fascinates me. And I'm extremely skilled in mineral nutrients. But my partner in France, William Texier, the founder of Terra Aquatica, formerly General Hydro Europe, has actually created a fully 100% vegan organic formula that is in fact growing better crops than we've grown with minerals. And this astonishes me. I didn't believe it was possible. The last May, visiting some of our clients in southern France who are growing produce for Michelin star restaurants, I saw that the plants actually tasted better, and that was shocking to me. So the field of plant nutrition and the field of organic is fascinating. It's really good science, and it's
That's
quite
going to be one of my
difficult.
questions, actually.
Well, yeah, and you see, I prefer to avoid animal-derived ingredients because they can be sources of prions, viruses,
Absolutely.
all kinds, a lot of pathogens. And
I'm really not fond of bacuanos,
no,
because
gross,
what are
bad.
those insects being sprayed with? The
Yeah,
potential of it. Yeah. So I'm very, and the idea of vegan organics.
yes,
We've done testing on vegan organics and have had fantastic results.
yeah,
So
yeah.
we've
This
also worked with vegan organics, and I agree. There's it's very interesting.
It's interesting, and particularly when the flavor of the crop is better. Because at
Yeah.
this point in Europe, you know, the European cannabis scene is a little bit like Canada and the US. It's chaotic at best, and it's not a strong marketplace. But the need for food is very serious. And nothing better than a good salad or some good food. You know, as especially we're getting older, we have to watch our diets a little more carefully. Less meat, more vegetables, simple advice, and get plenty of exercise. These are important points. The field of organic fertilizer, in my opinion, is in its earlier phase, at least so far as hydroponics go. Organics for soil, much easier. Soil is a good buffer. It makes everything, it's
Bioavailable.
plants, yeah, bioavailable, but you see, our clients in France are growing in grow streams like the old Aeroflow. This is pure water culture. We got no substrate in there except for a handful of clay pebbles, just to give
Yeah.
the young plant something to hang on to. The
Like a
roots are in
DW,
a
like a DWC or an NFT, nutrient film technique,
well, nutrient
basically.
film technique is a term that is misused all the time. Its origin is with Dr. Alan Cooper from England in the early 1960s, created NFT. And
Mhm.
it later got called nutrient flow
Yeah.
technique. That's a different thing. That's closer to my work. I remember Hillel Sofer, one of my mentors, who got his doctorate at UC Davis, was really the father of aerohydroponics. Once said to me, Larry, you remember that the real father of water culture is Alan Cooper with NFT, and our work follows that. But the key to our work and what I'm turned on by and I continue to design for is hydroponics with no substrate. Substrate provides benefits and also problems in hydroponics. Problems are it's a place for pathogens to accumulate, problems like fungus gnats you see in cocoa fiber all the time. The eggs are in the cocoa fiber, guys. Sorry to say, when you use cocoa fiber, you're bringing it in. And so eliminating substrate and reducing the amount of power required for hydro was the job assignment that Hillel gave to me. I said, what's my homework, Hillel? He goes, reduce the amount of power we need and find a better, replace substrate. We're doing water culture. Sadly, he passed away, and so I'm left with his technology. I do my best. Um, it still excites me to no end. I still love what I do. I still design hydro systems, nutrients, and associated technology almost constantly because it's fun. It's important. The world needs it. I'm yammering
Well,
now.
the world needs food,
The world needs
and there's less and
food,
less arable land. So
and the world needs cannabis. Damn it! Sorry, but it
I would
does.
agree with you. Your stance on cannabis was always, and I mean, with DEA, the U.S. Being a Schedule One drug, you kind of always had to walk a tightrope. You were you were there in the days of Operation Green Merchant. Was how was that perceived? Because I this is before my time, Operation Green Merchant,
I
or just
remember
before
it
my
very
time.
well. I
Yeah.
remember it way too well.
What
When
what was that like? And for those that don't know, Operation Green Merchant was basically DEA going and shutting down every hydroponic store in the U.S. Correct?
they started on the East Coast and took out 64 stores in one day. I got a phone call from my friends in New York that said, batten down the hatches, shit's coming down. They said, they're going for your records. So, me being 3 hours later on the left coast gave me a chance to talk to one of my lawyer friends, Chris Andrian, quite renowned. And he said, they want your records. I'm sending a private eye over to your facility. Give him all business records and your computers immediately. At 3 o'clock that afternoon, a couple of clowns with machine guns walked in and said, are you the manager? I looked at them and I said, how can I help you? They said, we're from the DEA. We have a subpoena for your records. I said, well, let's take a look. Now, I had recently graduated UC Berkeley and I studied a little bit of law while I was there. And I looked at it and I said, where's the judge's signature? And they said, it doesn't have a judge's signature, it's our supervisor. So I looked at them and I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, this is not a legitimate subpoena. It needs a judge's signature. And I will not be complying with this. And then the phone rang. And I said, I have a business to run. You stand by, please. And I picked up the phone, I'll never forget. And it was, hi, I'm Laurie Acesso from the Associated Press. Have you been visited by the DEA today? And
They're
I
here
said,
right
well,
now.
Laurie, it was perfect timing. Yeah, they're here right now. I said, hang on a minute. I said, gentlemen, it's the Associated Press. They want to know if you're here. Would you like to speak with them? Those two guys looked like I was handing them a rattlesnake when I handed them the phone. So they backed away. And I said, well, I'll be with you in a minute. I sat down. I said, well, Laurie, I got a call from the East, told me this might happen. So I called my lawyer. And so he sent over a private eye and they removed all the records and the computer. And I don't know where they are. They'll have to ask my lawyer. But these two clowns are here presenting me with what I do not believe is a legitimate or valid subpoena. So I cannot cooperate because the records aren't here and I wouldn't even if they were. And she was thankful and asked if she could give my number to other journalists, which later led to the New York Times, who did a long article in the Friday law section, where I was quoted as calling it an assault on the Constitution, which it is to me. In other words, I was following the law and the government was not, in my eyes. And that's how I see Green Merchant. Green Merchant never had the benefit of legitimacy, and all the laws against cannabis are a violation of everything U.S. Constitution stands for. So I'm busy being a good patriot, protecting the Constitution while my government goes sideways. Now, if we thought that was trouble, take a look at what's happening now. Oh
Huh.
dear. So
So
we can go into that if you want,
we're
but
gonna try
I'll let
to
you go.
avoid it. Yeah, we're just it's just too much. We shouldn't talk about politics, even though we should, and religion. We're not going to get into that today either. So, but truly, what's fascinating is those same DEA, those same RCMP, those same police are now directly involved in the cannabis industry. So the hypocrisy of people that did their best to keep this plant down, and they were just doing their job, which was a pile of shit. It's just doing your job is the biggest excuse for bad behavior.
Well, their
And
job
now,
is to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, which has
yeah,
now been flushed down the toilet by the current primate that thinks it's a president. Just for the record, the United States does not have an American president; it has a Russian president, Vladimir Putin, and Elon Musk is the vice president, and the Tangeranus is the clown that they put there as their figurehead, and that's my
I
opinion.
I was going to try to keep this whole thing PC, but I see we're going to be pulled in. So,
No,
anyways,
that's PC. Look, let's stick to the
but
facts.
listen,
Just stick to the facts.
today. There's 25% tariffs on goods flowing back and forth across the border. And as a Canadian, I want to support Canadian,
Yes,
but I also want to support people I've done business with for decades in the U.S. You know, we have a long-standing relationship, and regardless of, I could get into conspiracy theory. The fact of the matter is, both governments are finding a way to take 25% more of your dollars and my dollars
that's
through
right.
corporations, through tariffs.
That's right.
I wouldn't be opposed to tariffs as a way to make money for the government if they abolished income tax. But the fact of the matter
This is
is,
the bottom line is this is micromanagement of government, and it's an area I know far better than I would like to.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, let's just use a bit of simple common sense. The United States has no better friend than Canada. And Canada should have no better friend than the United States. But the United States has been infected with a serious disease. Half of the public have lost the capacity for rational thought, and the other half of the public have lost control of the country.
I think it's really
And
important just that
remember,
people,
remember, my background includes years in Lebanon where we were keeping an eye on a Russian double agent. This is nothing new to me. I'm
yeah,
sorry to say that my dad was a presidential appointee and assistant. And to put it in the simplest of terms, when Richard Nixon was elected, my father said he categorically refused to be in Washington, D.C. with Richard Nixon as president. 1 week before Nixon's inauguration, we were on a plane headed for Brussels, Belgium, where my dad spent his last year at the U.S. Embassy there. So, yeah, I take this real personally. I have a lot invested in international political dynamics, if you will, and much more experience and education than I wish I had. And as much as I wish a lot of other people did have, so they could make rational choices. But the simple truth is this chaos is affecting our businesses, it's affecting our colleagues, our friends, it's affecting the world. And part of me, the science part of me, laughs and goes, bunch of baboons making monkey noise. God, how stupid can we get? And the other part of me says, but always remember the real issue is climate change. It is the state of our planet. And as a scientist, I'll stay there. Let's back out of the politics and flush that one down. And let's focus on our work. Sorry,
I have
guys.
someone.
I'm
I
ranting.
have someone. I have a special guest, by the way.
Oh,
It's
hey,
it's
Larry,
Steve.
how are you?
I'm still crazy.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
we started, all three of us in this industry. We all had no gray in our beards,
Hell,
and
I didn't even have a
this is
beard
a
back
good
then.
indicator of the time that has been put into this industry. So,
But you
bunch of
know,
baboons, not wrong.
I know this is going to sound a little weird, but most of the shit I say is a little weird. Look, when I started all this, I was like 22 years old when I invented the aqua farm. I'm
Yeah,
73 now, guys. That's 51 years later. I still got 20/20 vision. I still go up and down mountains, fly airplanes, drive motorcycles. How the hell can I be like this at this age? Well, I've been smoking cannabis daily for 60 years. Where's the question? 60,
yeah. Mind
60
you,
years, guys. 60 years. Oh,
that's a long time.
bookers. Oh, you can
You
hurt
got me
yourself
this
with that.
bottle, by the way, 20 years ago. You gave this to me for a Christmas present. I still haven't opened it.
Oh,
So I think there's no better time than right now.
as you
We're gonna have
will.
a drink in your honor, Larry. And
For what it's worth, I've cut alcohol way, way back.
oh, listen, we know this is poison and cannabis. Oh, Jesus, it's that old that the cork broke.
Yeah,
All right, next problem. Yeah,
look at the proof on that. Do you see the
yeah,
proof? Read
yeah,
it. Read it
yeah.
to the
It's
people.
63.
It's very strong stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're not opening it because the cork broke. Yeah. That's how
Well,
old
that
it is.
should have kept it on its side.
Yeah.
There's a trick.
So
Yeah, man.
I guess I have a few questions for those that are interested. What, in your opinion, of all your brands of nutrients you've ever manufactured, your number one, first and foremost, most proud of?
Well, without a doubt, the three-part Flora series, and let me tell you a little bit of why. The three-part Flora series we developed in the very late 80s was a pretty much close to perfect mineral nutrient system. And the proof of that is my friend William Texier when he was living in California. He's the founder of General Hydro Europe and Terra Aquatica following his deportation for growing cannabis. Sorry about that. After he got in trouble for that, he set up the hydro farm to grow produce for the world's, for the United States' leading gourmet restaurant, Chez Panisse in Berkeley, which at the time was called the top gourmet restaurant in the US by some fancy magazine. This was a very big deal because the crops being served at that restaurant were being grown only on the three-part Flora series. There were no supplements. Well, there's pH up and down. That's pretty much it. So what happened was this marketplace started running wild with people coming up with all kinds of products that they wanted to sell and make money on, and trying to convince growers that they needed that. And at the end of the day, a true skilled hydroponicist knows how to read their crops and understands what the plants really need. When I design a hydroponic nutrient solution, a product, I do that in a computer with a database where I know exactly my target for each molecule, each element in the formula. And it's always going to be a bit of a compromise because the nature of ingredients is such that I'm probably going to end up with a little more sulfate than I'd like. But mostly I'm okay with that. It's going to be hard to get the amount of calcium that I want into that formula. I'm going to have to use a bunch of tricks to do that. Be that as it may, understanding plant needs is the first key. Understanding the character and nature of ingredients is the next key. And keeping in mind that some of these ingredients don't play well together. Pretty much once you get calcium and phosphate together, at a certain point of concentration, they start to interact and to fight and lock up and turn into calcium phosphate, and it's gone. It's there, but the plant can't get it. So the three-part Flora series really is everything a plant needs to grow superbly, but maybe they'll be a little vulnerable to some pathogens. Maybe they'll be a little vulnerable to some insects because we didn't have silica. Except to say silica was in the clay pebbles that we use, and it's enough leaches out to take care of plant needs, sort of, kind of. I've learned an awful lot over these ages. I'm into it 50 years now. And today, when I formulate, I'm as much feeding, I'm feeding the plant with amino acids. And the amino acids are sometimes bound up in a biofilter because now all my hydroponic systems have a biofilter on the return circuit. And in that environment of this, I think of it as a cow's stomach.
Yeah. You're trying to colonize microbes.
Yeah, exactly. And you want to feed the microbes, and the microbes help take care of the plant. It got more
Yeah.
complicated. Mineral nutrients are simple. I do math. There's the formula. It's perfect. Organic, more perfect. Trickier to formulate.
Yeah. It was going to be the next question, actually. What is the difference between organics and synthetics? And
Huge.
where do you see the future for both?
Fortunately, in the field of organic fertilizer, we got some cool new ingredients. William uses a lot of beet finesse for a nitrogen source. We use a certain amount of corn steep liquor, CSL, and corn steep powder. This is derived from corn processing at the industrial scale. And these ingredients have been approved Remember that the field of organic as a scientist is one thing, as a business person is subject to regulatory. And regulatory people are not very good scientists. The regulators at AFCO, the American Association of Plant Food Control Officials, is a group of regulators that have practically no comprehension of actual plant nutrient chemistry. They'll say things like, oh, well, there's no such thing as a complete solution and you can't put that on your label. And I say, yeah, we're growing the plants in purified water with this formula and it grows the plant. That's a complete solution. And their response is, yeah, you're right as a chemist, but as a regulator, we're not allowed to let you say that. So rules and regulations have nothing to do with reality, which is typical of regulators because they're usually people who are hired. They certainly don't have a background like me, where I am hardcore OCD, obsessed to the core of my being. The last molecule in my body is still going to be thinking about nutrient chemistry.
It
And so
seems as though you're not alone in that plight.
I'm not alone in that, and I've put a lot of pressure on these people. At one point, AFCO's minimum for copper to be declared rendered it an herbicide. And after years of telling them that the quantities they required were too much, I had an honest scientist from AFCO in North Carolina, Joel Padmore, say, Larry, that regulation was written in the 50s when we didn't have the analytical capacity to see the copper in the levels that are appropriate for plant growth. So we just put the minimum as what we could see in an analytical formula. And I congratulated him in telling that he had made us convert our formulas into an herbicide. He understood and he put pressure on them, and they made an exemption for hydroponic formulas so you could put the right amount of copper in without killing the plants. But this was indicative of the fact that the organization is about regulatory, it's not about plant science. And honestly, they don't have a goddamn clue. They really don't.
Yeah.
And I wish I could say somebody does. Yeah, we do. I do. And my colleagues do. And my clients do because they grow. We know what the facts are.
Absolutely. You want to get
Yeah.
your goods, you go talk to your customers.
Yeah.
That's honestly having Pacific Northwest Garden Supply in our back pocket has been such a monster benefit over other brands because
Yeah.
we got the goods immediately. We knew what was working. We knew what didn't work.
Yeah.
We got feedback, and one person says it, 10 people say it. There's validity to it.
Yeah.
So it's
Well,
I couldn't agree with you more.
yeah. And well, the plants don't lie. What you see
No,
is
they
real.
don't.
Yeah. They don't lie. People lie. Plants don't lie.
How did you? This is a question. It's kind of a bizarre question. I saw you deal with it like water off a duck's back. In the early years, you made a three-part, and this industry, for those that don't know, is extremely cutthroat. Like there are some bad actors, some people that are genuinely interested in ripping off other brands, and completely delusional in their approach, in my opinion. But I never asked you this question. How did you handle your company always being under attack by competitive brands? And you
Mostly,
did it with
I
you did it with such class. You didn't retaliate.
no, I don't acknowledge them. I remember Stuart told me years ago. He says, "Remember, I don't care what you say about me. Just spell my name right." You know. So when people were trying to knock off our formulas and doing their variations on it, I tended to ignore them. There were a couple of exceptions, but the bottom line is I don't want to give them any bandwidth. I'm not going to say their name or even acknowledge they exist. They
Yeah,
didn't invent this. They don't understand it. If they got a chemist to figure out a formulation, they don't know why. And what's the point? They're not in it for the people. They're in it to make some money.
yeah,
That's the last thing on my mind. I'm here because I'm into the plants. I love them. I want to see them grow. I want my friends to be successful. And I
yeah,
felt if you make a very good quality product, if you treat people with the highest level of respect and honor, then you'll do well. And you can forget, there'll always be scoundrels. There'll always be charlatans out there.
yeah.
And don't give them bandwidth, ignore them. They're irrelevant. They don't know
It's good
what
advice.
is going on. Yeah.
I mean, we were one of your first distributors in Canada. Steve specifically through P&W, early days, Ali's Wholesale, which is Steve's daughter. We sold an awful lot of General Hydroponics in Canada.
You sure did.
Yeah, the
We
early
should have put it.
90s.
Yeah, we should have put a pipeline.
Yeah, we sold an awful lot of GH. And I will say this, you were very good at making people love you and your product. You were really charismatic, and you really took care of the small people. And at that time, I was a very small person. I watched you. I watched the way you worked. I took notes, and that's where the mentorship came in. And many times coming down to visit you at your home, hanging out in your pool.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes, I was your pool boy, and those were very formative years for me, and I'm very grateful for the mentorship. I'm very grateful for you showing because Steve and I, we didn't start with anything. We didn't have a nest egg. We didn't, not a nest egg, but we weren't kids that were given any monies to
Yeah.
start. This is how we started. We celebrated the hustle and we worked our asses off. And
You,
GH
yeah. You,
was a
wait, the thing is,
cornerstone of our retail store at the time.
yeah, you brought integrity. This is
Yeah,
the key to success. Be honest. Treat your customers with respect. And if you make a mistake, step up and go, oh my God, we got a problem here. I've got a bad batch of nutrient out there. A bad
yeah,
batch of Flora Grow cost me the Australian market.
I
That was
remember it.
pretty, that was a real bummer. And
Yeah,
that was before we understood how to use microfiltration on our formulation to basically get everything down to zero point 0.3 micron out of there.
I
I
mean, listen,
learned,
there's
I made clean nutrient without adding preservatives. I did it with microfiltration, but it had to be done.
yeah,
And in those days, we didn't know. There was a lot we didn't know.
yeah. I mean, I remember speaking of a bad batch, you were beside an apple orchard, and you
Mhm.
had floaties from the apple orchard from the pesticide that was being used in the apple orchard.
Comes in on
You
the
know,
air, comes in on the
yeah,
air. Had to
yeah,
learn how to filter air, how to run a clean shop. There was a
yeah.
long learning curve. We made mistakes. Our
Listen,
formula, our chemistry formulations were great, but remember that there's stuff that wants to grow in there, and you got to deal with it. I
yeah.
like my microfiltration, keeps it clean.
It's
Now,
uh,
let me tell you issues. It,
yeah.
there are things that have bothered me and bother me a lot today. And that is how many plastic bottles were used for our product thrown out into the environment. I lose sleep at night thinking about it. These are problems that are serious. And at one point, I wanted to be able for all the stores to be able to refill the customer's bottle so they didn't have to throw it away and get another one.
We used
But
to.
then I started to get, yeah, except we got contamination problems, didn't we now?
Exactly.
Because those old bottles, who knows what was in there, but it was sure happy to see this new nutrient come in. It's a tough problem. Now, I've
Yeah.
got solutions for the future, and you'll see those solutions come out of Terra Aquatica in France because
Okay.
I have an interest in that company. I have a deep affection for all of my partners and all my clients in Europe, and I have the highest respect for all of them. And the chaos we're seeing internationally is not good. But as I look into the future, food security is a pretty big deal. And people at some point are going to have to learn how to grow some of their food because you're not going to be able to rely on the structure as we've known it in the past. That sounds pretty scary stuff, but that's kind of the way I think.
Yeah. No, I don't disagree at all. I mean, environmentally, growing cannabis indoors, I've said it time and time again. This plant should be outdoors. This is a byproduct of prohibition. Yes, you can standardize your crop time and time and time again, but growing under lights is a byproduct of prohibition, and
And
um,
it's got a big carbon footprint.
that's the biggest rub. I mean,
Yeah.
in Vancouver, in Canada, in British Columbia, we're mostly hydroelectric, renewable energy. Other places in the world, not so much. So,
Well,
um,
let me give you an insight. My friends at UC Davis in the plant science department are working on hydroponic farms in a box, is the way I'll describe it. And one of the professors, who's an old friend, had the vision that if plants were grown in a clean room, you would never need a pesticide or an herbicide or any kind of a poison because there's nothing in there to cause them harm. Now, the carbon footprint of running the lighting is a number. It used to be a big number, it's smaller with LED. And the carbon footprint of managing temperature control, meaning in the summer it gets too hot, in the winter it gets too cold, provides, this is another issue. But at the end of the day, the model looks good to me. And I want to continue to work on this for food production, where we can grow plants in CEA, controlled environment, and be able to grow plants without chemicals that are aggressive to the environment. Stuttering here. You get the essence of what I'm saying. In other
Sure.
words, indoor cultivation under lights is still excellent for certain crops. In particular, I'm thinking of greens, plants that grow quickly,
Sure.
that can be microgreens, super good for your health. Um, so the vision of, of controlled environment agriculture, CEA, in a clean room is fascinating to me, and I'm not giving up on it, but I'm looking at the math. You put
Yeah.
plants in a greenhouse, they're in a much more natural environment, but you get very high temperatures and the heat can be an issue. Now we got to get chillers in there to keep the nutrient from getting too warm. Because you know what happens with warm nutrient. You have an oxygen deficiency, and then pathogens can run wild. Nothing new here. This
Yeah.
goes back decades. I mean, I'm 50 years into this. Can you believe it? How the hell did that happen? It's like I
We
feel
don't
like
know.
Rumpelstiltskin. What a dream.
Crop steering was never a discussion back in the day. I
Which
mean, crop steering using fertigation, different fertigation techniques. Um, where where do you stand on that? Have you done much in the way of crop steering?
I'm not understanding you very clearly. Help me
Okay.
understand.
So
Hearing
listen,
issues.
let's work at this point. Yeah. Okay. Here, I got Steve-O coming in.
Hey,
Okay.
Larry.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah, this question is from me actually. So, um, crop steering is kind of all the rage right now for really intensive cannabis growing, EC stacking,
Oh,
frequent irrigation changes, so on and so forth.
yeah.
Um, it's all the rage amongst all the growers, all the equipment manufacturers, the sensors, the dosers, nutrient formulations. I guess my question to you was the science or the concept or the the method of crop steering. Where do you see it? How do you think it affects the nutrients formulations, or how the nutrient formulations would be different using this
Okay,
technology or this method?
I'm gonna give you a trade secret. And the history of this is fascinating to me. At a conference many decades ago, I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Alan Cooper, again, the inventor of NFT. And Dr. Cooper started going into a description of what he called hypertonic feeding. This is when the plants, I'll give you the digested version. I said, Dr. Cooper, how often and to what intensity? And he goes, well, the frequency and duration similar to how you would eat a meal. So I said, okay, 3 times a day for 15 or 20 minutes. He goes, that's about right. What are we going to do? We have 2 nutrient tanks. One is called the drink. It's an average nutrient. Let's give it an EC of 1.5 just for fun. Don't, that's just, it's just an anchor point. But 3 times a day, we're going to hit them with an EC of 4.0 for about 15 minutes. It's going to create an osmotic pressure imbalance. The cells are going to nearly explode. But before that happens, we'll switch back to the drink. And the plants will go, oh, okay. This is a little bit like feeding a goose to pump up its liver for pate, if you want a gross description. The balance of EC, light intensity, and CO2 in the context of a good environment, meaning the temperature and humidity are appropriate. It's all about balance. You can bring up your EC if you bring up your CO2 and your light and balance them out. And you can get incredible growth rates and yields. It's a cool thing if you know how to do it. In the organic world of my clients in southern France who are growing for Michelin star restaurants, they're in greenhouses. So they're not pushing things too hard. And they learned, for example, one client who grows Marmande variety tomatoes on 14-inch centers, starts them about now, let's say March to April. By December, they're going to be 15 meters long. That's a 50-foot long tomato vine. Do the math. It's shocking. They're running their EC around 1.5. Really mild, nice, gentle nutrient. But they're in no substrate. They're in what we used to call aeroflows, now calling grow streams. And it's a water culture intensive system. Now I'll give you another trade secret. And this is for everybody, and pay attention here. I was trained by my mentors to aerate the living hell out of the nutrient because the more oxygen, the better. But we tended to do that in the hydroponic system itself. So in a grow stream, you've got an injection of nutrient creating stirring and turbulence around the roots. Works great, as long as the temperature's not too high. But then I realized, that system doesn't always work well. Sometimes things clog, sometimes sprayers clog, sometimes they just don't work so well. So I started doing my nutrient. Now what I do is the nutrient returns through a biofilter. It goes into a makeup reservoir where I correct the EC and the pH, and then I infuse the hell out of it with oxygen. Something like a rainforest spinner is a good choice.
I am
If
getting.
you, yeah, the original Engedi, and then I deliver that nutrient outbound to the plants, and the aeration's already been done. That's a very elegant system. Once I built this for my company in France, I then added a second pump to the circuit so that it's always circulating slowly. It never stops. But every now and then another pump comes on and kicks it. So again, a few times a day, I'm going to give them a hard irrigation, but the water's always in motion. Now, this is different than substrate hydro. This is not cocoa fiber or clay pebbles or rock wool or anything else. This is water culture. This is real hydroponics. I mean, we're talking Formula One versus your family car here. And that's what my clients in France are using now. The system we sell most at Terra Aquatica is the Grow Stream. And it's the original Israeli hydroponic, aerohydroponic design that Hillel Sofer and I both invented separately. When he saw it at a trade show and said, "Hey, dude, you knocked me off. What's this about?" And I said, "Fuck that. I invented this." And he goes, "Yeah, tell me about it." And we became friends. And he goes, "Well, let me teach you." He became a teacher to me. Now, in matters of science, I separate out politics and religion. I want nothing to do with the subject. I'm a scientist. Just show me the damn facts. As a human being, I have a different attitude, and it's another set of stories. And we touched on it briefly with Green Merchant. But man, you've got to be true to your beliefs. You have to stand up and be an honest human being. And in the field of hydro, studying the plants and seeing what really works the best makes me tick. I eat,
Yeah.
sleep, live, and breathe this. I love it. I wish
This
I could.
this plant had no business being illegal in the first place.
I
Racism,
agree with that.
money.
The law is
Uh,
in violation of the law, as far as I'm
I agree with
concerned.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So,
all.
Larry, really quickly, we're gonna get into questions.
Yes,
Let's
sir.
let's let's start with the list.
Let's do
Well,
it.
you did ask the question about organics and mineral,
Yeah.
but Canadian Bacon Mike wants to know the difference between vegan and mineral fertilization, which is
Okay.
a little bit of a spin on the question you already asked.
So, Canadian Bacon, Mr. Mike would like to find out the difference between vegan and mineral fertilizers.
Ooh, ooh. I love his question, and it's overwhelming. Um, Mineral fertilizers are super easy. They're as clear as day to me. I know exactly what I'm doing when I'm formulating with minerals. But when we formulate with organic compounds, I have to defer to my partner, William Texier in France, because he has so much more experience than I do. He's been making vegan organic hydroponic formulas in France for a long, long time. They're for sale. The products are over there. Keeping in mind that European organic standards are different than North American, and I'll say the various states plus Canada, which is my favorite country in North America at this time. The only country with real integrity, although I give credit to Mexico. Anyway, that aside, it took new ingredients to make a vegan formula possible from a regulatory point of view. Um, what happened for me was, I'll tell you a personal experience. Last May, I was in France and I was in the greenhouses at Terra Aquatica, and they were harvesting beets, of all things, beets. Talk about a tricky plant to grow in hydro. And they had two batches. They had beets grown on Flora Series minerals and beets grown on his organic formula. And the Flora Series, I'd say, were a 10% greater yield. The plants were big and beautiful and perfect. And the vegan organic one was, maybe 10% less yield, smaller plants, but they were great too. So we took samples home and we got to the kitchen. The first thing I tasted was the Flora Series, and it was a classic, perfect beet. It's like, wow, that is a beet. That's exactly what it should taste like. So then we tasted the organic one, and I will never be the same. It didn't have the earthy flavor and the mustiness that normal beets have. It was more like a carrot. It was kind of sweet. It tasted better. I couldn't believe it. I mean, I really couldn't believe it. If 10 minutes before I would have said, it's a crock of shit. I don't think so. Good luck. I'm changed now and I'm humbled because I need to understand this and I don't understand it well enough yet.
Well,
But what I think I
this
have
is
to say,
important. This is
I think
important.
that, yeah, it's very
This is
important
super
because
important because
it's the
I,
microbiome, guys. It's the microbiome. We didn't know how important the microbiome in our stomachs were to our
yeah,
life, our health, our longevity. And honestly, without a biofilter in your hydro system, providing a location for microbiome to thrive in, it's a little harder to pull off. So I put biofilters in everything, and I am trying to understand what the hell is going on with these amino acids. Because the molecules are kind of too big to fit through the root, and yet they find a way to do so. So it's clear there's a lot we don't know, and a lot I want to learn.
I'll tell you a personal story of mine. I remember going to Amsterdam for the first time, and I saw. I mean, we were using ozone filtration, ozone
Hmm.
bulbs, and corona discharge to control odor. I went to Amsterdam. I saw these carbon filters. I was like, "What is this stupid idea? This is ridiculous." And I went in with that mentality of, "Well, we know what we're doing back in British Columbia," and quickly I was humbled by a better technology that performed better, that didn't have potential problems. Um, and I will never forget that because that was the moment I was like, okay, I need to stay open to other ideas and other concepts and not be so rigid in my thoughts. I know our lives coming to an end close, so we're gonna jump on another question.
Okay.
Kid Frost 247.
Kid Frost 247. What exactly vegan organics are made from, and what is it used up to make a vegan organic lineup? So
Well,
there's
once
different elements, obviously.
Well, there are different ingredients, and they tend to be products of fermentation. I
Okay.
remember when I first started to understand the nature of an organic nitrogen source, which is one of the tricky ones. I remember thinking to myself, fermented bean soup. I couldn't get it out of my head. Oh, which beans? Well, soybeans have an awful lot of nitrogen.
Yeah.
That was the simplistic description, but it was very close to the truth. When you use a fermentation process to break down organic compounds, those breakdown components are pretty cool fertilizer ingredients sometimes. It's a fascinating field. I challenged one of the professors at UC Davis, and he grabbed his head and he said, "Oh my God, you've just added tens of thousands of variables to the formula. Do you know how many kinds of microbes there are in soil in the plant world? It's huge." So
Yeah.
yeah, this is really complicated stuff. It's very difficult. But I believe the corn steep liquor, which is available in North America here and there as a nitrogen source, and the beet vinasse, which we use in Europe as a nitrogen source, plus the many other compounds. Remember, some of the mineral ingredients are legal in an organic formula. Um, Calcium carbonate, magnesium sulfate are water soluble, calcium carbonate to a much lesser extent it doesn't really meet the calcium needs of plants, but there's the tricky part. The hardest part of an organic formula, and at this point, is calcium probably first, and then I'd say nitrogen second. So yeah, it's difficult, but I have seen proof in France that the amino acids are a better way to go, and we're working on it. We're working on
Awesome.
it. I'm trying to learn it and understand it.
Mineralized phosphate is a no-go then.
That's in reference to him saying calcium and phosphate earlier.
Yeah.
Not
So we have
understanding.
Joe, not 8329. Mineralized phosphate is a no-go then. I forgot
Not
the part of the conversation we had in that one.
well.
You're
Let's look at
talking about calcium and phosphate
binding.
precipitating out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, even worse than that is magnesium and phosphate. May as well be glass at that point.
Yeah.
It ain't coming out as solution.
Calcium doesn't like playing with other elements. That's the long and the short of it.
And yet, remember, this is super important. Calcium is I think the only element that's non-mobile in plant tissue.
It does.
Remember
Correct.
that,
It sits.
yeah, and it has to be provided constantly
Yeah.
in relatively smaller doses. But it's super important, and it's one of the trickier things. I see people using extremely expensive calcium sources of various kinds, and I'm not convinced that's necessary, but I claim that I do not know enough about this at this time. I know
I
it's
would.
difficult.
There was a question by the same Joe Dash NA. You're saying back one it was a no go. I'm very specific about this. I don't like using natural elements that have the potential of being toxic or pollutant. Especially, I mean, there's recently 2 people that died from breathing back guano without a mask. So,
Absolutely. Look, first of all, it's lousy plant nutrition. Give me a
yeah,
break. Plants don't need dead body parts or
I
shit.
agree.
That's lousy fertilizer. But
Agreed.
what is it? So I remember asking Cal Herman. I said, "Hey Cal, what's the most perfect organic fertilizer?" He goes, "A seed." I go, "What?" He goes, "Think of a seed. It germinates. Everything it needs is in there. Now it exhausts its food supply, kind of like a bird egg. You know, birds have yolk in there to feed them until they hatch. Well, so too seeds have everything a plant needs till it needs fertilizer eventually. So it's complicated. Organic is not easy. Organic with scientific integrity is not easy. And
Ah,
regulators don't know anything.
so um, people are asking what you are using for a biofilter, and what a biofilter is and how you
Okay.
colonize those microbes.
Okay, let me give you a quick biofilter description. Let's take the return line from your hydro system. Let's first go through a bag filter. Um, Basically, it's a big filter bag. That'll
Yeah,
take out the big chunks. Inside of there, I put something called bio balls.
exactly.
Bio balls were made for the aquarium industry for fish farming, and they look like plastic starfish kind of thing. How do you describe it?
Lots of
And
surface
what
area.
Yeah, huge surface area for microbial life to populate. So my biofilter starts with just a filter, take out the big chunks. Then I put in the biofilters, which give residence to microbial life. And then after that, I return to the makeup reservoir. And so it's simple, very simple.
Yeah,
One of my clients in France who has a 2,000 liter reservoir. Is that right? No, it's 2,000 gallons. It's huge, enormous. It's for a whole greenhouse. He has 400 kilograms of clay pebbles in his return for his biofilter in that system. So he's using my favorite substrate, clay pebbles. Again, high surface area, meets his needs well. This guy is growing an entire greenhouse of strawberries and another greenhouse of tomatoes. So, and he's in his third year. He's really good at this. This will be his fourth year.
okay. Well, we are getting near the end. One last question.
Read it
Okay.
out.
Yeah, please. Sarah,
For
go.
homegrown, when growing in hydro, how can you increase the terpene levels in plants?
Ah, How do you increase terpene levels in plants?
One, your genetics are controlling. Choose your parents carefully. Two, the plant's needs have to be met in a benign and comfortable way. This means the formulation should be stable and steady. With the eccentric exception of the hypertonic feeding, which very few of us do outside of the scientific community, we tend to run, if anything, my friends in France have learned to run their nutrient milder. They don't push the plant as hard as we used to. They run lower ECs. Plants like consistency, they don't like change or shock. So be careful about your temperature, humidity, light levels, all the classic stuff. It's like eat a good diet and go out and exercise a lot and you'll be healthy. Same kind of thing with plants. Give them a healthy, benign environment. The terpenes and other chemistries of the cannabis plant is extremely complex, and I think the genetics is the most important single factor if you are a decent grower. But
Agreed.
it's said differently, you can be the best grower in the world, and if your genetics isn't great, well, it's going to be not quite as good as it could be.
Absolutely. Every single time people like this industry has been built on people owning nutrient companies saying, use my product, you're gonna have great results. If you don't have the right genetics, the right environment, the right technical know-how,
Yep.
it's of
You
no
might be
use.
disappointed, yeah.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, there is something that none of us have been looking at, and we need to look at, all of us in industry. And this is a category that regulators, I think in North America, I don't know where or how, once upon a time things made sense, called organic based. An organic based formula is a formula where more than 50% of the NPK is derived from organic sources by definition. That means you could blend in some minerals and still have an organic based formula that meets label law. The problem here is that organic produce has to be grown in a 100% organic formula, and organic based means the farmer can't call the crop organic. So this is a regulatory terms thing. But as a plant scientist, the blending of mineral nutrients plus really top shelf organic nutrients may be the best way to go. And I'm playing with this a lot. I stay busy in greenhouses. And of course, I've got the facility in France plus California. We stay working. Consider blending, but remember that when you do it, you're being a pioneer. Why don't you go with between 10 and 20% of your total NPK as mineral based, and the balance will be organic, preferably vegan. That's what I'm thinking on that.
Amazing. Mike, Bacon, Canadian, you're going to win the swag bag for the best question.
Also, you asked
Also,
in the beginning.
Yep.
I wasn't present. But Blue Nose Grows got the answer.
Okay. Blue Nose Grows, you're getting the book. It's a fantastic book. And a pair of the Method 7 glasses. And do we have one last giveaway? What is the name of the gentleman that's my business partner in Nelson? P&W Garden Supply. He goes as the Garden Sage. Anybody mentions his first name or knows his name will win the Revelry bag, the General Hydroponics hat, and the bubble bag.
They can DM you as well.
You can DM me after also. Larry, I think we're going to have to cut it off now, but it has been a real pleasure. I'm super grateful that you took the time to share your knowledge with us, and we wish you nothing but the best.
Thanks, Larry.
Thanks, brothers.
Always a pleasure.
Steve, good to see you, brother.
We need to
Hey,
drink
guess
some
what?
wine.
We're still here. Oh,
Yeah.
and then some. Just have a big old bud. We'll be just fine. Love
Okay,
you guys.
Take care.
All right, man. Take
See you,
care.
Larry. Bye now.
See you
Bye-bye.
guys. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.